So he was a big boy. From the time he was very little, he was still very big. And when he was 7 or 8, we just had a consistent problem with him. He just hit people when he'd get mad and frustrated. Normally he was a very pleasant child, but he'd get frustrated or mad or tired, and he'd just whomp his sister, who was several years older, and he could do some serious damage, even at 7 or 8, because he was big. So I went in one night when I was tucking him in for bed at night, we had prayers, and then I said, Mike, could I talk to you for a minute? And he said, sure, Mom. And I said, okay, so do you remember, perhaps, maybe, when you were a little boy, that sometimes I spanked you? Yeah. Okay. So I said, just out of curiosity, how often do you remember getting spanked? Because the tone of his voice, I thought, okay, A, he clearly remembers this, and B, it's not a happy memory. And he said, every day. Okay, so much for the he didn't remember theory. And I said, well, but my heart was convicted. I thought, this little boy has been carrying this around. I thought it was inconsequential, because it wasn't every day by a long shot. And I, probably not the most empathic of responses, but I said, well, Mike, I want you to know it wasn't every day, but I can tell that it felt like every day to you. And I'm just so sorry. I was wrong. That wasn't a good way for me to handle things when you were young, and I'm just so sorry. And I hope you'll forgive me. And he didn't say a word. And I didn't know what else to say. So I just kind of said, well, maybe we can talk about this again. And I kind of slunk out of his room. And I thought, well, that went well. But I realized, he'd been carrying this. The interesting thing, sisters, is as far as I know, my 28-year-old son, from that day until this, has never hit again. I never said a word to him about his problem. I just apologized for mine, and everything changed. What was interesting was years later, when he was about 15, he and I were driving home from the church one night. He'd been playing basketball, and I'd been giving a little talk at the Relief Society, whatever they called that meeting then that we don't have a name for anymore. And we're driving home, and he said, so how'd your talk go, Mom? And I said, I think it went fine. He said, what'd you talk about? And I said, well, it was really kind of funny. I was talking about X. I don't even remember what X was, but somebody had asked me a question about such and such, and I ended up telling that story about when I had to apologize to you when you were a little kid because I'd spanked you when you were young. Now, remember, this is one of the traumatic moments of my parenting experience, right? And he looks at me and he said, you used to spank me when I was young? And I was like, you don't remember this? Because I was just dumbstruck. He not only didn't remember my apologizing to him, he didn't remember that I'd ever spanked him. How many times a day did I spank him when we were having this conversation when he was 7? Yeah. 15, it was gone. And I learned the power of an apology. That with an apology, sometimes we can actually change the past, because the only part of the past that's still alive in the present is the story we tell ourselves about what the past means. And when we change that meaning, we can change the past.